Okay, so we're in chapter 7 in Kohelet. We stopped last time in verse 12. We continue here. ראה את מעשה האלוהים, כי מי יוכל לתקן את אשר עיוותו. It says, observe the handiwork of God. How can you correct what God has distorted? I mean, that's how the pasuk is read, and that's how it's translated. But there's another way to, and with that reading, it's hard for me to comprehend because the Qohelet says God distorted the world. But I think an alternative reading is Re'et Ma'aseh Elohim doesn't only mean observe, but more like it says here, consider. Ki mi yuchal letaken et asher iveto. It says, if you distort the handiwork of God, who is going to fix it? Right? And maybe he speaks about the natural order. It's a possibility. But I don't see the context here. But remember that we said Qohelet throws at us a lot of thought-provoking ideas. ביום טובה אהיה בטוב, וביום רעה ראה. גם את זה לעומת זה עשה האלוהים, על דברת שלא ימצא האדם אחריו מאומה. It says, on the day when you're good, enjoy the goodness. וביום רעה, in a day of adversity, ראה, consider, think about what are the consequences. גם את זה לעומת זה עשה האלוהים. One corresponds to the other. על דברת שלא ימצא אדם אחריו מאומה. And it is guaranteed that you will find nothing after him. Could be that again comes from the point of view of desperation. That Qohelet says we have good days, we have bad days, and they balance each other out. It's like a sum zero. At the end of the day, what have you gained? You gained nothing. Or it could be that at least the first half is giving us advice. B'yom tova yeh betov. When you have a good moment, enjoy it and cherish it and remember it. Uv'yom ra'a re'eh, and on a day when you go through adversity, consider how can you get out of it, because this, as it says, lo yimtza adam acharav meuma. We are leaving nothing for ourselves. It's all only for the next generations. So if we learn, I think that may be the lesson. We learn to harness the positive energy that we have and overcome adversity, then we can make the world a better place. But he goes on to say, את הכל ראיתי בימי אבלי, יש צדיק עובד בצדקו, ויש רשע מעריך ברעתו. So now he questions the divine justice, theodicy. He says, I've seen so many things. One of them is, יש צדיק עובד בצדקו. There's a righteous man who perishes with his righteousness. ויש רשע מעריך ברעתו, and there's a wicked man who lives a long life and prospers. So the conclusion that one can derive from that is אל תהי צדיק הרבה ואל תתחכם יותר, למה תשומם? Says, don't be too righteous. If I be wise and I'll take care of everything, I will have no time to take care of myself. On the other hand, he says, אל תרשע הרבה ואל תהי שחל, למה תמות בלא עיתך? Says, but don't be too wicked, don't be a fool, because then it will cause you to die before your time. It's the exact opposite of what he said before. In verse 15, he says, the righteousness and foolishness and wickedness do not affect your life. And then he says, you have to maybe just stay in the middle. Don't be too wicked. Don't be too righteous. What is the meaning of don't be too wicked? Can you be a little wicked? How do we understand that? I think that he's maybe two voices here that people say, you know what, we don't know what is exactly the right path. So we'll try to, be a little of this, a little of that. But verse 15 is really a direct question, an inquiry into the divine theodicy, into the divine justice. Yesh tzaddik oved betzidko, veyesh rasha marich bera'ato. People perish even though they're righteous. People live a long, successful life, even though they're wicked. Maybe that connects to the previous one, where he says, use what you have to make the world better, not for you, but for others. Maybe over time, the balance in the world will shift. And in verse 18, he says, טוב אשר תאחוז בזה וגם מזה אל תנח ידיך, כי ירא אלוהים יצא את כולם. It says, it is good to take hold in one and also the other, because if you fear God, you will do all of them. יצא את כולם. So this is one of the enigmatic paragraphs in Qohelet, that it's hard to tell whether he has a dialogue with another person. One says, "Be righteous." The other one says, "No, you're righteous. It doesn't work. It doesn't help you." Then he says, "Okay, maybe a little righteous and a little wicked," and it's really hard to understand exactly what Qohelet is trying to tell us here, unless he's trying to challenge us to say, what is it that you choose to do in life? He says, "החוכמה תעוז לחכם מעשרה שליטים אשר היו בעיר." Wisdom is a stronghold, more than 10 rulers over a city. So maybe he's talking about consistency. A wise person, whatever that person does in life, is connected. There's a concept that Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler, in his book Michtav Eliyahu, refers to. He calls it the linear man. He says there's a punctilious man, like the man made of points and the or dots, and the linear person. So the linear person is someone who has a goal, and all of his actions, all of his action thoughts lead to the same cause, to the same purpose. And a dot-to-dot man is a person whose actions are scattered. They don't lead anywhere. So asara shalitim asher hayu ba'ir. Why would there be 10 rulers in the city? It means there's rapid succession. One comes, and the other one goes. Like in Roman history, when they talk about the year of the 4 emperors, I think it was the 67 CE, that or maybe 66, that 4 emperors in the same year, one chased another, or like the elections now in Israel, 3 elections within less than a year. That shows instability. So asara shalitim asher hayu ba'ir, there's no direction, there's no plan. Where do you see the plan? Hachokma ta'oz lechacham. So the wisdom is your best fortress. Ki Adam, verse 20, Ki Adam en tzadik ba'aretz asher ya'aseh tov velo yecheta. Says, but remember that we can all make mistakes. We can all sin. So that could go back to his previous discussion of theodicy. It says if people suffer, it's because they're not righteous. Or he says it's a reservation, a qualification of verse 19. Wisdom is important, but don't trust yourself so much, because as righteous and as wise as you are, you might make mistakes.
Rabbi, can I
yes,
I was going to connect it to Pasuk Tet Zion, which is Al Ti Tzadik Harbe. Ki ein tzadik ba'aretz asher lo yecheta. In other words, in Yiddish, you could hear someone like saying, Zayin yishtak reis tzadik. In other words, there's only so much, you're human.
Mm-hmm.
And when you tefasta meruba lo tefasta, you have to accept, lo yeh, like don't impoverish yourself to help other people, where, there are limits to how much you should drive yourself, and to be a tzaddik, and you could even tie this to something you talk about a lot, which is, don't have too many chumras, that's another possible reading. And I'm also thinking of the Gemara where the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and one of the reasons Zechariah, I think it's Itzkelus, he was at Tzaddik Harbe, he refused to put a mum, So I think there are lots of possible understandings of what he might have been driving at. In other words, which was that the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed because someone was too, quote, from. I mean, if you will, he didn't want to put a mum in the emperor's korban, because people will say you can sacrifice animals that have a defect, and therefore the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed entirely. So I think there's a lot, I mean, also this is in addition to what you said. It's not instead of, but it's very rich. It's a very rich idea to me about the side of Korbet.
Yeah, I want to unpack what Yoel said. I want to, for maybe some people don't know the full story. The story is about a rabbi by the name of Zechariah ben Avkilas that the Gemara connects with the destruction of the temple. The story goes that there was a traitor from among the Jews who incited the emperor or the general against the Jews. And maybe we'll deviate a little bit because after all we have to before Tisha B'Av, so we have to mention it in a way. So he incited the emperor against the Jews, and he said the Jews are rebellious and they do not respect you. They said, why are you saying that? Which is, of course, we don't have the historical verification of that. It's maybe a story that rabbis created to convey the message of what problem they had with this kind of leadership. Anyway, that person told the emperor, you should send them as a gift an animal for sacrifice, and I guarantee you that they will not sacrifice it. They will reject your gift. What did he do? As he was taking the animal to the temple, he maimed the animal in a way that was not obvious to the Roman onlookers. But when he came to the Kohanim said, we have a problem, we cannot sacrifice this animal. So the rabbis debated what to do with this animal. Some of them said, we'll sacrifice it anyway because our life is in danger. So Zechariah ben Avkilas said, if we'll do so, people will think that it is okay to sacrifice a maimed animal. So they said, you know what, let's kill the messenger so we won't be able to go back and tell what happened. So he said, if we do that, people will think that the punishment for maiming an animal is death. We cannot do that. And the conclusion, and so they did not sacrifice the animal, and the traitor remained alive, went back to the emperor and said, you see, I told you. And that was the cause of destruction. And that's where they say, the extreme caution of Zechariah ben Avkilas caused the destruction. Now, in reality, this story is a little different. The truth is that we know from historians, one of them is Josephus, that many people doubted because he himself was a traitor, but other evidence corroborated that. The theory is that Titus, Vespasian and Titus, did not want to destroy the temple. It was not the Roman policy to destroy temples because they were afraid of the local gods. As pagans, they believed in all gods. So usually it's my God takes control over your God, but it's not to say that your God is powerless. That's what Nebuchadnezzar used to say. If you read through the Tanakh, you see that part of what Nebuchadnezzar and also Sanherib, the Babylonian Assyrian kings, used to brag about whose God is greater. But the Romans had a different approach, like the Greeks before them, that all gods are valid. So it's not in my best interest to destroy the temple of any god. Why upset him? It's better to incorporate him into my system somehow. And it's only the stubbornness of the Jews who kept rebelling against the Romans again and again and again that drove Titus to the understanding that without destroying the temple, he would never be able to break their spirit. But even that could be understood as, part of the story that you all mentioned as part of the criticism. the Jews, the stubbornness, like the Chumrah, right? The Jews decided to be stringent. They wanted to have full religious independence, and they pushed the Romans too far, and they retaliated with brutal force. If they would have said, "Okay, we'll live with the status quo. Let us wait for this wave to go. The one empire falls, another empire comes," but they couldn't do that, and eventually they caused the total decimation of Am Yisrael. So, yeah, Ariel mentions other. There are so many stories in the Talmud about the destruction of the temple, why it happened. The the historical truth is hard. It's always. I mean, further back you go, it's harder to tell. We have different sources. Josephus, as I said, was a traitor, a defector who joined the Roman camp. He speaks about the different divisions within the Jewish fighters in Yerushalayim. In other places, some people wanted to join the Romans. Some people said we'll fight to the last drop of blood. Some people said we have to broker peace. There were different trends among them, but eventually the zealots were the ones who were most vocal and pushed everybody to keep fighting. And again, 60 years later, at the time of Bar Kokhba, they fought against the Romans, and that brought total destruction. And I think maybe I have mentioned it here once in class. The mistake of both the zealots and Bar Kokhba and Rabbi Akiva was that they did not fully understand the difference between the Greek Empire and the Roman Empire. Because they were looking at the example of the Maccabees were able to defeat the Greeks and get semi-autonomy, and they thought that they could do the same thing. But what they didn't understand is the Greeks were a decentralized empire. There was a basis in Macedonia or in Greece, in Egypt, and in Syria. They were fighting against the Syrian Greeks, and for the Syrian Greeks, this little stubborn, annoying province called Yehuda, not province yet because the Romans weren't there, little country called Yehuda, wasn't worth it at a certain point to lose more soldiers and energy and money. So they brokered sort of some kind of peace with them. The Romans were different. The Romans were a centralized empire where Rome was the central hub, and the whole world paid tribute to Rome. So for Rome, losing even the smallest outpost, even the most remote country, meant that the wall would crack and everything will fall apart. So they could not allow anyone to rebel. So when the Jews rebelled against them and they thought we're going to repel them like we did with the Greeks, that was a big mistake. And maybe that's something that, like you all said, we could derive the pasuk. Al ti tzadik harbe v'al titchakam, lama tishomem. Sometimes you have to accept reality. Don't try to override and change it. Definitely not in the name of religion. And I think this is something that we've seen during the last crisis with the coronavirus, right? People who insist on going to synagogues and going to mikvahs and going, in the beginning of that of the crisis, and unfortunately, who got many other people sick. But still, I feel, and I would like to hear from you more, but I feel that in this chapter, there's a little more, or there's a little less consistency than others, throwing out several different dictums one after another. Here in verse 21, גם לכל הדברים אשר ידברו, אל תיתן ליבך, אשר לא תשמע את עבדך מקלליך, כי גם פעמים רבות ידע ליבך, אשר גם אתה קיללת אחרים. So, in a way, it's connected to the idea of don't be too righteous, right? It says, don't be so sensitive about everything that people say, and because if you are sensitive, you will hear people say bad things about you, including your servants. But remember that you sometimes spoke in a similar way about others. So maybe it goes back to don't be too righteous. People pretend to be something that they're not, and they are very upset about the behavior of others. Meanwhile, they themselves behave in that manner. כל זו ניסיתי בחוכמה, אמרתי אחכמה והיא רחוקה ממני. So I tried all this by wisdom. Now it goes to sort of review all, but we didn't finish yet. We still have have the book had רחוק מה שהיה ועמוק עמוק מי ימצאנו. What that which was is far and deep. How can we find it? Which in a way contradicts what he says, En hadash tahat hashamesh. If you say that there's nothing new under the sun, just look around you and you know what is happening. But he says that it's far and deep. Saboti ani velibi lada'at velatur ubakesh chokhma vecheshbon velada'at resha kesel v'asichlut holelot. Says, I try to find what the wise thing to do is, what is the calculated thing to do, and to understand wickedness and to know that it is foolish and that foolishness leads to madness or wasting your life for nothing. But here we have 3 verses that could be very, very upsetting. ומוצא אני מר ממוות את האישה אשר היא מצודה וחרמים ליבה אסורים ידיה טוב לפני האלוהים ימלט ממנה וחוטא ילכת בה. ראה זה מצאתי אמירה קהלת אחת לאחת למצוא חשבון. אשר עוד ביקשה נפשי ולא מצאתי, אדם אחד מאלף מצאתי, ואישה בכל אלה לא מצאתי. לבד ראה זה מצאתי אשר עשה אלוהים את האדם ישר והמה ביקשו חישבונות רבים. So let's read now. And I find more bitter than death the woman whose heart is snares and nets, and her hands as bands. He who pleases God shall escape from her, but the sinner shall be taken by her. Behold, this I have found, said Qohelet, adding one thing to another to find out the account. Which yet my soul sought, and I found not. One man among 1,000 have I found, but a woman among all those I have not found. Behold, this only have I found, that God made men upright, but they have sought out many inventions. So, on one hand, we see in these pesukim, in these verses, a very harsh criticism of women, very negative view of women. On the other hand, that's the place where we hear Qohelet speaking in the feminine. Re'eze matzati amera Qohelet. Now, if there would be a mapik, a dagesh in the hay, and the nikud was different, amara Qohelet, you would say Qohelet, it was the one who said it. But it's in the feminine. So, how do we isolate that? So, one way to read it is this: Umotzeh nimar mimavet et aisha. That's one place to put the comma, right? A woman is more bitter than death. Why? Because she is metzodim v'haramim, etc. Or he says mar mimavet is that specific type of woman, which is metzodim v'haramim, whose heart is snares and nets. Meaning, he doesn't say that all women are like that. He feels that he falls in sin when he's being trapped by a woman. Still, it's a negative view, but not of all women. Then, this is said in the masculine. Maybe it's a quote that was known to the people, and Qohelet, as a woman, respond, ראה זה מצאתי, אמירה קהלת, אחת לאחת למצוא חשבון. So the Qohelet replies, you're wrong. It's not everybody is like that. You have אחת לאחת למצוא חשבון. You have to look at each person and understand their nature. Don't put general labels over everyone. So now the first speaker responds, אשר עוד ביקשה נפשי ולא מצאתי, אדם אחד מאלף מצאתי, ואישה בכל אלה לא מצאתי. So the first speaker says, no, I think that you could find maybe one good man, one out of 1,000, but a woman, you could never find a good woman. And now Qohelet, the second voice, the feminine voice, answers, לבד ראה זה מצאתי, אשר עשה אלוהים את האדם ישר, והמה ביקשו חשבונות רבים. It says, because that speaker uses the same heshbon of verse 27, and she says, this is what I have found out, that God created us straightforward, honest. But as we grow up, we become more complicated and distorted. Now, uh, that is how I would like to read that. I don't know that it's that's the reading, but that's my thought. And I want to add something about the last pasuk. But I heard someone had a question, Israela.
No, it was me.
That's right. Yeah.
I was thinking it would be interesting to look at that exchange in light of lines 21 and 22.
Let me go.
Because when they say not to, because you might overhear your servant saying something, right?
Mhm.
So I think what maybe it would be interesting to add is that that's a power relationship, right? So a servant, much like a woman in this time, would not have had equal voice.
Right.
And so would then may not have the same freedom of response, or may have some resentment or whatever that someone who had equal status may not have. And then the answer to that is, like you said, 22. Wait, you've done this yourself, right? So if you take that little reflection and then apply it to what's being said about women, it's like one bouncing off the other, in a way, putting it in context, like, all that criticism was just foreshadowed, right? How do we deal with criticism? How do we think about who's speaking? Anyways, that was my thought.
Interesting. No, I think it adds also to Kohelet's previous statement of Gavoa Me'al Gavoa Shomer, but he's concerned about hierarchies, that each one, each person in a position of power takes advantage of someone who's lower than them, right? So when he says Gamata Kilalta Aherim, it's not Aherim who are at your level, but those are your superiors, and you do it behind their backs. And I think that this is, yes, like you said, related to it's nice to connect it to verses 26 to 29, where the argument of Kohelet is, do you listen, or do you try to understand the woman? Ahad le'ahad limtzu heshbon. So I just want to comment on the last pasuk, and then we go to tefillah, to Arvit. אשר עשה אלוהים את האדם ישר והמה ביקשו חשבונות רבים. You know that the psychologists, philosophers before them, and psychologists today were debating for a long time whether we are born a blank slate, and then we could turn to anything. Depends on education. Others, so there's the famous debate between nature and nurture, and what we know or believe today, I think, sort of a synthesis, believing that we have certain qualities and certain propensities when we're born, but education is a key in developing what we have. But there's something else that is sort of universal, and that is Asher Asa, and that is something that is related to Rosh Hashanah, and I want to bring this idea here. When you say Asher Asa Elohim et Adam Yashar, Ve'ema Bikshu Cheshbonot Rabim, we are straightforward, and then we become distorted, is that there is the concept of innocence, childhood innocence, right? It's not just innocence, it's a sense of justice. Children have a sense of justice. Being brought up in the right environment, children understand what is right, what is wrong. Even toddlers, I think the experiment that I read about was maybe a baby over a year and a half, or maybe 8 months, and I have to find exactly the information. The baby was shown 3 shapes. One tries, like, let's say a circle is trying to go uphill, the triangle pushes it down, and the square helps the circle go uphill. After the toddler, the baby watched the animated clip, the testers brought in blocks in the shapes that he just saw, the triangle, a ball, and a square, and the baby recoiled from the evil shape, so they naturally understand evil. However, another study that was done showed that they were following a school bus where one kid was bullied, and an older girl defended him. But over the years, it kept on going. I mean, not, I guess, in an aggressive way, but it didn't get involved. From first grade to fourth grade, the girl stopped defending the boy, as if she accepted that this is the world. That's it. You cannot change it. And I think that is what I read in the pasuk. Elohim asay et adam yashar. We have this pure innocence inside us when we are born, but we lose it when we grow up, and that is something that we have to go back to. And that's why I said it. To me, it's related to Rosh Hashanah, because when we hear the shofar, it's a simple voice. It's something that you cannot distort. It reminds us of our childhood and of the first time that we heard the shofar, and maybe wakes up this feeling within us. So with that being said, we're going to go to Psalm 104 and the Tefillah of Rosh Chodesh.